The Trail of Petals, a Hanahaki alternate universe, Adrientte Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction, Part 1. God, it was still stuck in her throat. Marinette coughed hard, feeling like no air was entering her lungs. And again she coughed, searing pain zipping through her chest. Marinette clutched the white bowl in front of her. Her will was strong, but her strength was weakened. More flower petals escaped her mouth. The floor was already covered in pink and red petals. It was like an artsy music video, but oh, this was so different. How did I even end up here? Marinette laughed weakly, feeling the lump in her throat painfully trying to escape. She knew, kinda at least, why. It was a ridiculous reason to say the least, but at the same time, it felt completely justified. Another forceful, agonizing cough. More petals. They were getting bigger and fuller, healthier looking. Oh, the irony! Marinette's blue eyes scanned the bathroom floor. No longer was it crisply white. Now the splashes of pink and red littered the floor. There were splats of which Marinette couldn't quite discern. Were those rose petals red or red from blood? She couldn't even tell anymore. She coughed up more flowers. Thankfully, that was all that came, but the thorny feeling hadn't left her chest, worrying her each second. She gasped in air that she desperately needed. Marinette tried to hold back the next batch. They came fast and hard in rounds for her, 4 to 7 normally. Her hands, stained with red of course, pressed against her mouth, trying to force it all back from whence it came, but alas, no such luck, and the petals spurred out. The feeling of climbing tickles left her throat, leaving the familiar, choking object alone once more. Marinette! Ollie cried, slamming the door open. Her brown eyes scanned the floor, seeing the sheer amount of petals covering the small bathroom floor. You have to! Please! Ollie's eyes began to flow with tears. She almost fell onto her knees, grabbing both of Marinette's shoulders. You have to do it, she said again, her mouth unable to contain the sobs. Marinette smiled weakly and hugged her friend tight as she could, as her tired body was weakened. It was breaking down. I can't, she said, her voice raspy. Ollie's body shook with cries. Yes, you can! Ollie drew back. Marinette shook her head. I'd rather die than do it. You know what it will do. Marinette said. Her words made Ollie cry harder. The brunette cried many tears, perhaps as many petals as there were surrounding them, like a sick, twisted version of a memorial the universe had granted them. You will, she said in a defeated voice. Ollie felt her heart sinking low into the ground. I know. 7 months prior. This is really heavy, Ollie complained as she lugged the box full of textbooks into the new apartment. Yeah, I bet! Marinette laughed because she was only carrying comforters and they were light as can be. Despite that, Marinette threw them down onto the floor and kicked them to their rooms. Didn't you literally make me come, and I quote, manual labor? Nino grunted, carrying the rest of their boxes. He narrowly missed dropping them from a ways off the ground, but thankfully only let go harshly when it was only an inch to the floor. And you're doing great, Ollie said with a laugh, kissing her boyfriend sweetly as thanks. Marinette pulled a face and pretended to retch. Guys, PDA is so gross, she said, scrunching up her nose. Ollie and Nino both laughed. They both knew that Marinette believed them to be the most adorable couple ever and was just joking. We're literally in the privacy of our new apartment, Ollie waved her arms around. It was a rather nice apartment for, two university students, but, then again, when one of the said two university students had just ended a 7-year contract with a famous designer as their paid second-hand designer, and the other came from a rather wealthy family. Okay, well, the limits were pretty loose. Somehow it still had the true new house feeling, even with the yellow blotchy stains on the wall, but that would easily be hidden by a painting. Marinette felt rather excited by the prospect of living on her own. Technically speaking, the past 2 years she had been living in the dorms, and now this was her first real move out. She would be lying through her teeth if Marinette said she didn't feel like a classy adult when she was able to look around her surroundings and call it hers, legally and financially. Yeah, but it's not like I just suddenly became blind, Marinette said with a playful smile. She picked up one of the boxes Nino had left on the floor and carried it to her room to unpack. Dude, what do you have in your box? Nino shouted from the living room. He had probably picked up the boxes again and noted that the pile was significantly lighter. A sewing machine, duh, Marinette called back. She inspected every little bit of it. It was an expensive machine, but very well worth the cost in her eyes. You're lucky nothing got hurt, or else I'll put your head on the first platter I find, Marinette said when she walked back into the living room after carefully placing her machine on a table. Nino raised his arms in surrender. You can't kill me, he said. Marinette raised a brow at him. I'm pretty sure I can, if I want to, she deadpanned, but her smile was just barely concealed. Nino shook his head fervently. I have to go home and welcome my new roommate, too, the brunette said, backing away. He was more than aware of Marinette's capabilities. The girl may be small and innocent-looking enough, but no one would assume if they had never seen her in action. Hidden behind the pleasant voice and excited mannerism lay a fierce warrior with a sharp tongue and second-degree taekwondo black belt. She was a force to be reckoned with, though many had tried and failed in testing her. Whether it be a physical battle or a verbal spar, Marinette always won. Okay, then hurry up and go do that, Marinette said, with a laugh, throwing a pillow at him. After quickly kissing Ollie on the cheek, Nino fled back to his apartment. Ollie turned back after closing the door and shook her head, clicking her tongue at the same time. You need a boyfriend, the brunette sighed. Marinette shrugged and turned on the TV. Thank God the apartment came mostly furnished. It really was an insane find, for the neighborhood was great, with little nearby coffee shops and local businesses. Price-wise, it was a steal, and the elevator actually worked, and it was a decent quality of housing. What's your first class? Ollie asked. Marinette as she plopped down onto the couch. Marinette groaned and covered her face with a hand. Don't remind me. In a week at 9:30. I'm picking up coffee beforehand, Marinette said. Ollie had chuckled, knowing that odds were the girl would be late to class, even though a 9:30 class was rather late. For one, Marinette was always late to anything and everything, even after high school. She had yet to grow out of that habit. Secondly, Marinette was such a night owl, she'd happily sleep until 2 in the afternoon and then announce good morning to everyone. Ah, the sweet Marinette charm. Yeah, I think you'll enjoy all those coffee shops and everything they can offer. Any earlier classes? Ollie asked, nudging her friend in the side. Marinette looked at her with a dead look in her eyes. 8, she said flatly. Ollie fell over laughing, ignoring Marinette's protest that it wasn't funny, even though the grin on her face was very telling otherwise. Their high school started at 8:15, and regularly Marinette would rush in just as the bell sounded. Great idea, Ollie finally managed when she got enough air. Marinette shoved her, though in a playful way. In that case, we're gonna watch movies all night and use the freedom we have now, Marinette said, getting up and picking out a bag of popcorn to microwave. Ollie rushed to her room and dragged out blankets directly from the box. Screw putting things away. Movie night is a go. Or movie week. And yes, the girls did savor every bit of free time they had. Nino came over quite a bit, with lots of stories about his new roommate. Apparently, his roommate had been an only child growing up and had no idea what it was like to live with someone else. Or how to do basic life skills for that matter, but at least they were trying their hardest. For instance, one time Nino came back from being at the girls' place to find his roommate frantically scooping soap bubbles into the trash can. They had tried to do the dishes, but had no idea how to get rid of the bubbles, so rather than common-sensingly leaving them to burst on their own, their roommate panicked and tried to throw them away, only to be caught in the act. Marinette did think it was probably very sweet that the roommate was trying, despite how childish his questions could be. Asking if they needed to share toothpaste was strange and had definitely caught Nino off guard early that morning, but they all agreed they'd rather live with a person trying to adjust with another rather than one who thought they owned the world and didn't need to do a thing. First day of class, and Marinette was mildly panicking. She wasn't late, no, not just yet. She had 15 minutes, and with her track record, even an hour wasn't enough time sometimes. She took another huge gulp of her coffee and got out of the train station that was thankfully close by her first class. Marinette held down her bag so it wouldn't be bouncing against her hip and practically ran across the building that her class was being held at. "Sorry," she called to the people that she narrowly missed running into. They gave her angry looks, but she couldn't pay them any more than an apologetic smile. Gasping, Marinette made her way to the front doors and breathed in deeply. Her nerves were going haywire, and she needed to shake them out. Unfortunately, her body thought that doing so physically would work, and she dropped her cup of coffee, spilling it all across the concrete, and her shoes, for that matter, pink ballet flats. She cursed quietly as the brown liquid washed over them, turning a third of the shoes into a murky color. Marinette picked up the cup, which was now sticky, and sadly threw it out. Feeling her hands uncomfortably sticky as well, she dug into her bag to find hand sanitizer. Pulling out her phone, she saw that she only had 5 minutes till 9:30, and she wasn't even in the building yet. Ugh, curse her luck. Luckily, Marinette found her class, and very quickly on that matter. Walking in, the class was full, and there was only a handful of seats left at the top. She quickly made her way up, praying that she didn't trip. Thankfully, she didn't and took the first seat that she saw. Seating herself, Marinette breathed in deeply again. For once, she wasn't hopefully late for class. This year was going very well indeed. Marinette was adulting very well this time around. From her book bag, Marinette picked out her notebook and a pencil to take notes. The class was rather loud with lots of chatter this year. She winced. Hopefully it wouldn't be like one of those classes where everyone thought they were in high school again. God, those were the worst. But the chatter was perhaps why she didn't notice someone slipping into the chair next to her, not even asking if it was open. Then again, it wasn't like Marinette had claimed it for something, but still, it would have been polite. She only noticed this new person when she had turned her head, and instead of an empty row, she saw a seemingly tall and athletically built blonde guy. Marinette almost jumped back from surprise, but he didn't seem to notice. Rather, he was busy chewing loudly on his gum. Marinette breathed in, so as to not snap at him to stop chomping. She was normally a laid-back person, but oh my god, did she have her pet peeves. There was no need to shout at someone for something so small, especially when they were a stranger. Except, by the middle of class, the boy wouldn't stop moving. His fingers rapidly tapped on the table, making the most obnoxious clicking sounds only she could hear. Marinette bit her lip to avoid a nasty comment. The last thing she needed was to have a foul reputation. But then his other hand joined him, and oh my god, the tapping doubled. In sound and in speed, this kid was seriously getting on her nerves. Marinette looked at the clock. It seemed to move so slowly. The ticking of the hand seemed to match up with the tapping, and it was kind of really driving her mad, to say the least. Marinette's fingers curled in, digging into her thumb, not really as a way to get ready to punch, but more like a way to relieve herself of her annoyance. Finally, class was nearly done. There were only 10 minutes left on the clock, and Marinette could not wait for them to pass. Especially since at some point, the blonde decided to stare right at Marinette. It was so freaking weird. She just got the feeling of being watched, turned her head slightly to find that, yes, the blonde's eyes were trained on her rather than the professor. Marinette wanted to face him and say something snarky. Perhaps, "Can I help you?" But refrained. At the very least, he stopped his tapping and was bouncing his leg instead. But that wasn't as noisy, and more so annoying because she could hear the nagging of her mother to not bounce her leg in her head. Every couple seconds or so, Marinette found herself flickering her eyes slightly to see that every time, and without a doubt, the blonde was still looking at her. Sometimes his mouth was open as if he was gonna say something, but he didn't so much tap her directly on the shoulder. Thankfully, the professor decided to take mercy on them and announced that class was over. Marinette bolted up and out of her seat, gathering her notebooks with the attached pencil and phone in hand, and quickly went down the stairs to leave the building. "I'm about to scream," Marinette cried as she closed the apartment door. Ollie looked up from the couch and eyed her curiously. "What?" the brunette said. Marinette sighed and put her notebook onto her desk to come explain to Ollie. "This kid in my class, oh my god, he would not stop tapping his fingers and chewing this gum so loudly. It was so annoying for the first day of class." Marinette groaned, and her friend patted her shoulder lightly. "Did you say something to him?" she asked. Marinette shook her head. "No, I'm pretty sure my lips and tongue are raw because I kept biting it. And oh, when he stopped tapping for the last 10 minutes, he was just staring, not at the professor, but at me. Like, not a word, just looking at me. Nothing else." Marinette threw her head back and ran a hand down her face. Ollie, however, smirked at her friend. "Was he cute?" the curly-haired girl said in a sing-song voice. Marinette stopped for a second just to consider it, and then shook her head. Does it matter if he literally has the most annoying habits and stared at me instead of talking?" Marinette pointed out. Ollie clicked her tongue. "Yeah, well, I guess that's kind of weird, but it could just be him being nervous because he thinks you're cute," Ollie said with a grin. Marinette shrugged. I doubt it. He wasn't creepily stalking at me at the very least." The black-haired girl cringed because, okay, was that seriously the minimum baseline God, what did the world come to? So is he cute though? Ollie kept prodding. Well, if one was to ignore the annoying habits, one could also say that the blonde was very attractive. His hair was messily tousled in a stylistic way that Marinette, as a fashion designer that often worked with models, could appreciate. And an athletic build, tall stature, broad shoulders, and all that had never been a complaint for most girls. His features were nice, somehow masculine and soft at the same time. He'd make a heck of a model, and so, yeah, in short, yes, he was attractive, and Marinette could admit that in her head, but knowing Ollie, admitting it out loud meant endless begging to shoot her shot and get the guy. I don't think he's my type. You've only dated one guy. Marinette stood up and bit her lip to keep the smile from spreading on her face. Well, I'm going to go review, and then we can make lunch, she said, walking back towards her room. Ollie chuckled from the living room. You so think he's cute. Marinette opted to ignore that.